Hi, this is Gardner Campbell, and I'm speaking today with our new Hub Director for OpenLearning 19, Sue Erickson, who is Director of the Hofheimer Library at Virginia Wesleyan University. Really delighted to welcome Sue as the new Hub Director, and we've already got lots of brand new things planned under her direction. And it's just a real delight to have Sue on board, who's now in her third year of open learning. Is that right?
That's right.
And you've got, as all superheroes and superheroines have, you have an origin story. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved with open learning and what your pathway has been since then.
Sure. Well, I would say 3 years ago, I really didn't know what open learning was. And the year before that, I had had lunch with a stranger, which is one of the things I recommend because you never know what will come out of it. And we exchanged cards, and a year later, she was involved in the steering committee for Open Learning 17, or what would become Open Learning 17. And so this was Stephanie Blackman at William and Mary. And the steering committee wisely decided that they needed a librarian on board. So yay to Gardner and the others for that. And Stephanie remembered our meeting and reached out to me. And that was how I got involved with Open Learning 17. And then it was a lot of learning after that.
So since one of the things that's happening in this Welcome Week is bringing people up to speed who haven't participated before, what sorts of things should a new person be aware of? What sorts of things should a new participant expect? And what did you find your own experience to be like as you went from, in your words, novice to node?
I think you need to come to open learning with an open mind and with a willingness to be open. And the scary part of that is that you have to tap into your inner vulnerability in order to be able to connect with other people. That's a really important feature of open learning. It's a CMOOC, not a MOOC. And so we're very focused on the connections that people make and trying to facilitate those connections. And so, bring that spirit of willingness to connect. It does mean going out on a limb, but you know what they say about that? That's where the fruit is, right? That's the best learning happens just outside of your comfort zone. And I remember reading that quote somewhere, and I think it's very true. And so I feel like I spent most of the 13 weeks of Open Learning 17 just outside my comfort zone and learning constantly. And it was a great experience. Personally, I love being in that space where I'm learning new things. So if that's something that appeals to people, this is the right opportunity for that. And the good news is it's just 4 weeks this time if you include this opening week.
So tell us a little bit about this new iteration. It's the third time through. We've continued to tinker and tweak and reshape and rethink. This time, it's a very compressed schedule that is focusing on 3 or 4 main topics, main areas. So take us through what we might expect over the next 4 weeks.
Sure, and I love that you use the word tinker. The name of my blog is Thinking and Tinkering, and so I love tinkering, and I've loved doing that with you as we planned how to shape this iteration. And so we have pared it down. We have this opening week to introduce new people into this learning environment, to give some strategies. And then the first full week of the CMOOC is going to be a combination of open access and OER. Both hot topics always for the past several years. And so we'll have some readings. We'll encourage people to blog, and these are things that we'll do every week. We might have a Twitter chat. We might have some video interviews like this, different ways of engaging. And part of open learning, I think, is facilitating that learner agency. So we have a lot of choices for people to make. They can do everything. They can do some, whatever works for them. The second week, we'll move into talking about open pedagogy. And then for the final week, we're going to focus on open faculty development.
The third member of our advisory board this time, not pictured, Stephanie Blackman, brought this up early in the planning that it would be great to use the last week as a springboard into various kinds of, well, what are our next steps? What action will we take? What kind of call to action would we have in that last week? And it's also a kind of a meta week because this whole project began as an effort to build a sustainable network of faculty development. And as you've looked back at the last 3 years, you've seen a number of different kinds of faculty participation. How do you think about Open Learning 19 as an exercise in professional development generally, faculty development in particular?
In terms of faculty development or professional development in general, I always think that networking is such an important piece of that. And that is really at the heart of what Open Learning 19 and the previous iterations have been able to do. I was looking at my own Twitter profile, as you do once in a while, yesterday, and I remember that when I started with Open Learning 17, I had a Twitter account, but I really wasn't using it. I had this many followers. And now I think it's something like 175. And probably most of that has come through the Open Learning iterations. I'm now connected with instructional designers. I'm connected with teaching faculty at other colleges and universities. I'm connected with high school faculty. This network has just grown and grown with people who work in faculty development, administrators at different institutions, publishers. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Anybody who is somehow related to this and grabbed onto the hashtag or another hashtag that's related to working in the open, and it just builds from there. So I think I have found that connecting with people in different fields has been part of the exciting thing for me. We can kind of get siloed, and this is a great way to break out of those silos. So I hope that that's what new participants will be looking for, the opportunities to make those connections beyond your normal travels.
In some respects, this idea of building a network kind of mirrors, it seems to me, maybe, you tell me, this idea that a library is also a network. It's not a box of books. There are books in there,
right.
just as what we've built in Open Learning is not simply a link farm, though we have links. It's not simply a collection of resources, though we have those too. In many ways, the network is the deliverable. And I'm curious to know how you feel your own identity and professional work as a librarian plays into the way you look at this big umbrella term of open learning.
I think it plays into it in a big way. I think that I see a lot of connections, a lot of parallels, as you do, between libraries and open learning. And I think one of the things I would add to the parallels you've already talked about is that libraries are places of community. We try to build community. We try to create opportunities for community. If you think about some of the programs that your local public library puts on, a lot of that is to try to build communities. And the same thing happens in many academic libraries as it does in my own. We try to be in touch with the needs of our community, with the interests of our community, and create opportunities to bring people together. And sometimes it's just bringing people together around a common interest. So, maybe a chess club is meeting in a library, and that brings people together, or a knitting circle, or what have you. But also, we put people, we try to create opportunities for people to be in a space where they can interact with information. That can be a virtual space, it can be a physical space. You might be sitting at a table in a reading room but there are books around you, and there's value in that. Even if you don't pick one off the shelf, you know that the knowledge is there. And so we try to, I think with something like OpenLearning, and the hub in particular, the website for OpenLearning, that is openlearninghub.net, we have tried to create a space, a virtual space there, where, as you said, there are links, there are readings, there are videos people can watch, but there's also an interactive piece. And we do that through syndicated blogs and a syndicated Twitter feed. So it's constantly changing, and we hope that's what's going to bring people back. And to bring it back to your question of how does that relate to libraries, I think that, too, libraries are always changing. We're always trying to be innovative, present something new to our communities that they might not have encountered before. So that's another parallel, I think, between libraries and OpenLearning.
It strikes me that one of the many gifts and attitudes towards openness that you bring to this directorship is a willingness to experiment with different kinds of online presence. And I wanted to ask you about your latest adventure in telepresence, which, as I understand it, was a presentation at a conference by means of telepresence robotics. I think it was your first time with that experience. And yet, from what I understand, you found that a satisfying way to be present and to connect with people. And that was new. So talk a little bit about that experience.
Sure, I did find that satisfying. I wasn't sure how that was going to go. It was new for me, but I had a good friend on the other end who had done it before, and I, they helped with the setup. We ran through it in advance, which is always nice. So managed risk, right? But it is a great way to connect. It did not feel virtual to me. It felt very real. Just as talking with you now feels very real. We are not in the same physical space, but it was very much like the conversation that we're having now. And I could see what was going on in this poster session as part of the symposium. I could see the background activity as well. So in that sense, it was all the more real, because it wasn't, something staged in an office. It was, I was there. I was there, Gardner. It really was.
What you're describing is, a delightful way to think about how computers and networks and personal connections can all be in symbiosis. And it's not one or the other, it's a both and.
And I think just like in the face-to-face world, you have to make an effort, right? You have to go. If you and I are at a conference together, I've got to make the effort to go over to you and say hello. And that's very much true in the online environment. You've got to look at the other blogs of the other participants and like what they said, comment on what they said. That's all part of the interaction. That's part of the conversation. But you do have to make an effort to be present.
And present we will be for the next 4 weeks in OpenLearning 19. Sue Erickson, Director of Hofheimer Library at Virginia Wesleyan University. Thank you for leading this effort this year. Thank you for all you bring to it. And thanks very much for talking with us today.
Thank you, Gardner. You helped start it all.